Okay. There we go.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. My name is Charity Rouse. I'm the Director of Local History for the Spartanburg County Public Library System in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And we are delighted that you are joining us for tonight's program on naturalization and immigration records. This program is being recorded and will be placed on the library's YouTube channel in the Genealogy playlist. If you are watching the recording and would like a copy of the handout, please email KROOM at infodepot.org, or you can go to Spartanburg Libraries and choose Contact Us and the local history link, and that will get you to us, and we will be happy to send you that link. Thanks for joining us. So, as we look at immigration and naturalization records, um, I have to do a couple shout outs. Um, our Kennedy Room patron, Kathy, who gave us permission to use her grandparents' papers from her personal research and her personal collection throughout this presentation, the Cazoles. Um, and then also for my closest immigrant relative, it is my first cousin's other grandmother, Grandma Brubaker. And was given permission from the family to adopt her as my Ellis Island connection because unfortunately all of my ancestors got grandfathered into naturalized status by virtue of being in the right place at the right time, and we'll talk about that. This certificate of naturalization is one of Kathy's documents, and it is for Joseph Cazzoli. And the certificate is given to the person being naturalized and is not duplicated in the court records. So you want this original document if you can find it, but it's going to be in the hands of family, not in the hands of the court. So we need to talk about naturalization. We've got a couple of definitions that we need to cover. Naturalization is the admittance of a foreigner to the citizenship of a country. Immigration with an I is the action of coming to live permanently in a foreign country. You can travel to a foreign country multiple times. You can live in that foreign country without the intent to become naturalized. But if you are immigrating, you intend to become a naturalized citizen. Now, immigration with an E is the act of leaving one's own country in order to settle permanently in another. So, again, not every trip is due to these two things, but many trips are. Even in colonial Virginia, the Jamestown colony, many people came to Virginia and then didn't like what they found. It was pretty rough and pretty, you know, not civilized. And they turned around and went back. So they may have initially intended to become a citizen over here and make a life over here, but they did not always stay. So sometimes people change their mind. It's just something to keep in mind as we go through these naturalizations. So the timeline of naturalizations started in colonial America in the 1600s. 12 of the 13 colonies did have naturalization laws and kept records about who was coming, but not New Hampshire. So if your relatives were in New Hampshire, I'm very sorry. These records will be found on the state level and typically held at either the state library or the state archive, which varies by state. So you're going to have to look at resources that tell you how to find things in various states. There are a couple of different series of those. National Genealogical Society has their Research in the States series. The Ancestry Red Book, last published in 2003, but we do have it on the shelf in the Kennedy Room, will also tell you where to look for these. The Family Search Wiki is another great place to look, so you know that you're asking the right place. Because, for instance, in South Carolina, it is the Department of Archives and History that keeps those early state records. In Virginia, it is the Library of Virginia. So you're going to have to just do a little research to find out where to look. So, some very key moments, and this is a huge, broad overview of this topic. There are a lot of very specific things in naturalization and immigration, and I only have an hour. So, um, the first actual regulation by the British Crown for colonial naturalization and citizenship didn't come until 1740. Remember, Virginia, Jamestown happens in 1607. Uh, Plymouth, uh, Massachusetts Bay Colony, 1620. They were headed to Virginia, but they kind of got off track a little bit. So at that point in 1740, they finally made the decision that you are a citizen of your colony and Great Britain. This is part of what sets us up for taxation without representation because we were citizens, those in the colonial British colonies were citizens of Great Britain, but had no voice in the government. In 1776, if you were born in the American British colonies, you had citizenship. Notice it didn't say anything about those who had come from elsewhere but also fought for the cause. We're getting there. In 1778, the Articles of Confederation stated that you were a citizen of all of the colonies if you were a citizen of one of the colonies. So this combined those original 13 colonies into the United States. And in 1790, there was the first federal naturalization law establishing the process for becoming a citizen. 1790 is also when we get our first census. We figured things out between 1783, 1785, really, and 1790. It took a minute because they didn't have the internet and they didn't have typewriters. So a lot of people riding horses were taking messages up and down the East Coast, or they were put on ships and sailed from harbor to harbor. So this is from some microfilm that we have in the South Carolina collection at the Kennedy Room. And these are naturalization records for South Carolina held at the National Archives. And they are for pre-1906 naturalizations in federal courts. So before 1906, you did not have to be in federal court to naturalize. You could be in any court. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But these are records that were compiled for South Carolina from the federal level courts and the records that ended up in the National Archives. The top line is Anderson John S. He's 31 years old from Norfolk, England. Line 2, just to give a little contrast, is Aiken, William, 34 years old from Antrim, Ireland. You can see that those lines go on to the second page. And so line 1 continues that he has a residence in Charleston, South Carolina, occupation mariner, and he is admitted on 10 August 1808 as a citizen. On line 2, that was William Aiken. John Anderson was the first. He has a residence in Beaufort, South Carolina. His occupation is merchant, admitted on 23 September 1811. Now, citizenship was not required. Naturalization was not required. Voting, it was, but these guys were getting their naturalization in part because as a merchant, he was probably traveling back and forth to Europe on ships. As a mariner, that person was also traveling back and forth. And If you were a citizen of the United States, you had a little bit more standing to protest conscription by someone else's navy, um, like the British. So, need to talk about women. Derivative citizenship for women was a thing. The woman's citizenship status was whatever her husband's citizenship status was. If he was an alien, i.e., non citizen, not a little purple dude, she was also considered to be a non citizen. If he became a citizen or was a citizen, so was she. Until the Cable Act passed September 22nd, 1922. After 1922, a woman could still lose her citizenship by marrying an alien, but had to go through the full naturalization process to gain citizenship. So you were what your father was if you were a child or an unmarried woman, and you were what your husband was. A lot of women did not understand when they married someone who was not a citizen that they lost their citizenship. But until 1920, when women gained the right to vote, it wasn't such a big deal to most women. It was a big deal to many. So just remember, if you're looking for a woman, you're looking under the men in her life. Derivative citizenship for minor children is much the same. Children under age 21 were derivative under a parent, father or mother, provided they had resided in the U.S. for at least 3 years, 3 years in most eras. There are exceptions to this, and we can't cover all the exceptions or we wouldn't get through the program. In 1906, the law changed and it mandated that all derivative family members be listed on the declaration of the head of household. Prior to 1906, you may or may not get those derivative family members listed on the application. And it means it can be very hard to track derivative citizenship, particularly prior to 1906. So, there were also many groups that were excluded from citizenship. Between 1790 and 1866, anyone who was not a, quote, free white person was excluded until, well, as of the Civil Rights Act of April 9th, 1866, and reenacted in 1870, expanding the definition beyond white, because remember, in 1865, male enslaved were freed and able to vote. Female enslaved were free, but still not able to vote. Chinese were denied citizenship under the Act of May 6th, 1882, which was repealed by the Act of December 17th, 1943. Chinese Exclusion Act is what that is more popularly known as. Native Americans were granted citizenship under the Act of June 4th, 1924. June 4th, 1924. So, if your ancestor was active in a native tribe, they were excluded from United States citizenship. Now, some of them may have gotten it prior to that. Just because there's a law doesn't say somebody isn't going to fall through the cracks. But, and then there was an act in 1917, which was the first to require a literacy test in an attempt to stem the tide of immigrants. So by the 1880s, we had a lot of immigrants coming in from Eastern Europe in particular, and that continued into the first part of the 20th century. And they were just trying everything they could to try to make us a little less popular. It was never successful. People figured out ways around it. But these are just a few examples of groups excluded from citizenship at various times. So, this is where my people all fall. Automatic naturalization. There's no paperwork. People born in annexed territories automatically became citizens when the territory was absorbed into the US. So, 1789, residents of the various states become residents of the country. And it doesn't specifically say that all of them became citizens, but it does imply that if you were living here in 1789, you automatically became a citizen. 1803, we had the Louisiana Purchase. 1819, we bought Florida. 1845, here comes the Republic of Texas. 1846, Oregon Territory, all the way out there. 1848, California and Mexican Territory. In 1854, we had the Gadsden Purchase, which was Arizona and New Mexico. Alaska and Hawaii came much later in 1959. So, if your people were already living in those places, there may not be naturalization paperwork because they were part of one of these larger blanket, okay, everybody there, well, except these people, is a citizen. So, if you were Native American, you were excluded from this. If you were Chinese, you were excluded from that between 1880 and 19 whatever. So just know, sometimes there isn't paperwork because paperwork was never done. So what is the naturalization process? It is a two-part process, includes three primary documents. So the Declaration of Intention, filed in nearly any court until 1906, and then supposed to be filed in federal court. I have seen some not in federal court after that date, but again, compliance. The petition for citizenship, oath of allegiance, and proof of residency, again, filed in any court and not necessarily the same court if the person had moved. And then the certificate of naturalization, which was issued to the new citizen. And so we saw the example of the naturalization certificate issued to the new citizen. Now we're going to look at these other parts of the process and documents. So the Declaration of Intention was often filed near the port the immigrant entered into the US, sometimes New York, but over 100 ports were active throughout our country's history. So just because you hear mostly about Ellis Island on the East Coast and Angel Island on the West Coast does not mean that those two federal naturalization centers were where your ancestor came through. They could have come through Boston or uh, Baltimore or Charleston or New Orleans or any other place. And don't forget that we also have land crossings. So they could have come through El Paso or any of the Canadian border areas along that border. So land crossings did also keep records. Some of those, many of them are being digitized. So, you'll get there. Minimum residency between this declaration of intention and the petition for naturalization varied through time. In the 1790s, it was either 3 or 5 years, depending. And 1798 to 1801, I don't know who got a hair bee in their bonnet, but 14 years. And then they changed it back to 5 years. And it's been 5 years since 1801. But this is between declaring your intent to become a citizen and filing the rest of the papers. That is the minimum. It could be longer because somebody just, you know, life got to them and they didn't do that or they didn't have the money to file. And so it is what it is. But you're going to be looking at least a 5 year span in most cases. This is an example of an Ohio naturalization petition. This is for an Adele DeRosa. This is in the early 20th century, and I'm looking because I didn't write my date in my uh, notes. But she is living in Cuyahoga, Ohio. She's a housewife, aged 51, and she's a female, and it gives demographic information. She's 5'3", she's 175 pounds. She's from South Italy, born in Naples. See, this tells you the good stuff. This tells you where they say they are born and when. Um, and her husband and his, when they were married in New York, New York, he's also born in Naples, Italy. So maybe they knew each other as kids and she came over to join him. Um, she lists the Declaration of Intention with its number and date in 1921. So she's probably trying to get ahead of the Cable Act coming in Cleveland, Ohio, in the Court of Common Pleas, last foreign residence, etc. You go down the page, and beginning in 1929, photos were required. So this may be that she was on the early end of it. Actually, this is 1939 that she's applying. So she's been in the States for a little bit. And so, but you get her picture and you get her signature. For the petition and the oath of allegiance, the proof of residency, this could be filed in any court, not necessarily the same court as the declaration, and it includes the statement of last foreign residence, date of entry into the U.S., method of entry, ship or border crossing, current residence, and the affidavits of a petitioner and witness. And both of these have the opportunity of saying where and when the person was born. Um, so you do want to see that information for getting back across the pond. So we're back to the Cazzoli family in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 1928. We have the petition for naturalization of Mary Cazzoli. And fortunately for us, we have some information about the children. Now, they had lived in the US prior to 1922, but she, in 1922, started the process because of the Cable Act. Now, you will see that they were from Yugoslavia. Spelling is optional in English of foreign words. And you see, okay, Mary was born in 1912 in Philadelphia. Joseph, the son, born in 1914, 1917, 1919, all in Philadelphia of the United States. And then Antoinette was born in 1922 in Yugoslavia. They had gone back for a visit and she was pregnant and had the kid there. And then Edward again was born in Philadelphia. So this will explain why one child may have been born in Yugoslavia and that these are her children. They were married in 1911 and her husband was naturalized in 1927. So after the Cable Act, she had to naturalize separately from him. Um, the and I haven't looked at his naturalization to see whether they listed all of the children on his, but the American-born children would not have needed to be naturalized, but they were listing them to be complete because she is stating she has 6 children, and here are their names and dates of birth and locations. You go down the page and you get affidavits from various of the neighbors who will testify. Actually, Joseph testifies that his wife is eligible, as well as a neighbor. And then on the next page, you get the oath of allegiance and that she is making her allegiance to the United States, renunciating, whatever form of that word you want to use, um, any oaths that she had made previously to her previous home. And then you get the order of the court admitting their May 29th, 1928. And then if the court denied the petition, it would be on the back of the page. Always look at the second page and make sure there isn't a second or a third page because sometimes you miss the good stuff if you do. And then if they happened to have to continue court for whatever reason, that would be listed here. And then you get the certificate number and when it was issued. You also see typically a little form like this that would say she came in and Maria, Marija, entered date of arrival for permanent admission to the United States was in August of 1922 after that child had born, Antoinette had been born, and she arrived on the Aquitania through through Ellis Island in New York. Now, how do you find these? You can search before 1906 courthouses, federal, state, county, municipal, state and federal archives, libraries, historical societies. There are lots of lists. People have been indexing these for years. After 1906, they should be at the Regional National Archives and Records Administration regional facility that holds the court records for that federal court. But the local court which handled the process may also still have a copy. They don't always send all of the copies up the food chain. So you may luck out with easier access, not at National Archives. National Archives at archives.gov has a lot of resources for this. Ancestry Library Edition or Ancestry has an immigration collection. FamilySearch.org has some collections as well. You may find them on a passenger arrival list. Last resort would be going to the USCIS, Citizenship and Immigration Service. And the link is there. That is going to cost you a lot of money and take you at something like 9 to 18 months these days is what they're running. So just know there are lots of ways. And for most of us, we only want a copy of it for informational purposes. We do not need a certified copy for citizenship reasons. So go the cheapest route you can is my recommendation. Now, this is the court record card that Kathy used to locate the court copies of Mary Cazol's records. And notice Marya. Remember, spelling is optional. And it was court in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And the declaration of intention was omitted by the clerk of the court because of the Cable Act. And so everything was in that one petition. So passports are another record that can be helpful, and certain eras are available, certain eras are not. Our library processes passports, and we have multiple passport appointments every single day, it seems. So These have been issued by the U.S. federal government since 1789. National Archives has passport applications from October of 1795 to March of 1925. And again, archives.gov. The U.S. Department of State has from April 1925 to the present. Please note that passports were also issued by states and localities until August 23rd, 1856, when sole authority was given to the U.S. State Department. So, between those very early dates and 1856, U.S. State Department may or may not have a record of it because they may have been put out by the state of South Carolina for one of their citizens. They were not required for travel until during World War II. But there are certain people who would want a passport so that they could prove what country they were traveling from, due to wars, due to certain friendly or unfriendly borders. Again, due to if you were a mariner and got conscripted into someone else's navy, you wanted to be able to prove, hey, you can't do that. We are friendly countries. We are not at war. I I'm calling the consulate, you know. Now they had to wait till they got to the next port and then send a letter, but it gave some backup for folks. There were a number of different types of passports. There were regular passports, emergency passports, and special passports for diplomatic personnel and government officials traveling abroad. Um, I have a friend whose spouse has been a military attaché for the diplomatic service, and each family member has both a diplomatic passport and a just regular passport. And depending on why they are traveling, it they are instructed which passport to use. So sometimes you see people having multiple passports. Um, And if you want to know more about passport records, National Archives Preservation or National Archives does a presentation series most years, usually in the spring. And in May 2024, Claire Kluskens did one all about passports as part of their presentation series, and that should be in the National Archives YouTube videos. It was fascinating. This is the Cazzoli family. Obviously, the picture was taken with the parents and the elder four children. So this was prior to that 1922 trip back to Yugoslavia. Just like in naturalization, women and children were often covered by the husband or father's passport. So they are from Serbia, which became part of Yugoslavia. And we know this because this is the passport paper from Kathy's collection. And it is released in the name of His Majesty Alexander of the Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. And passport stamps are slowly going away because they're becoming digitally attached to your passport. But passport stamps are kind of fun. And you get many passport stamps in this. So that is a foreign passport for people residing in the United States. He was a merchant. He was back and forth buying and selling things. This is a passport application for my first cousin, three times removed, um, James Ross Allen. He was a Baptist missionary to Brazil for a good portion of his adult life. And he applied. You'll see a little scratch out of when he said his birthday was, and you'll see why in a minute. But he feels, he's never been outside the US at this point, but he is applying for the passport so that he can go um, to Brazil as a missionary. He signs his oath of allegiance that he is an American citizen, he is not intending to immigrate, etc. Processed in 1919. Lived in Greenville. You get some demographic information again on him, and you see he does have a picture on this. On the right-hand page, you get the letter from his employer stating the need for a passport, that he was going to Brazil. They wanted him to have all of the particular documentation. I mean, World War One is kind of happening, so they want him to not get conscripted. And then his mother appears, and this is where the birthday discrepancy comes in. I don't know whether she remembered his birthday or was attesting one of her other children's birthdays. But anyway, this is the birthday they believe because she was present at the birth and an adult when he was just there. He was born that day, but does not remember the day of his birth. So they trust the mother's memory more than the child's. So, um, yeah, dates are dates, whatever. Now, while in Brazil, actually, a couple of his children were born in Brazil, I have come to find out, but they had a son, William or James Ross Allen Jr. in 1920 in Brazil. The birth was recorded at the American consulate, so he was a legal citizen because he was born abroad to American parents abroad. And they wanted to make sure when they brought him back to the United States, or he decided to come for college, which he did, that he would have legal standing. Dad's passport number is given, and the mom does not have her own passport. So she falls under his. I've not found the papers for the other siblings, but I'm sure that they would have been filed. So passenger lists are another place to help you figure out how and where you have the information about where someone was naturalized. The passenger list generally tells the ship and the country where the person came from and who he or she arrived with. If they were traveling with family members, that can be a great clue to know that you've got the right James Ross Allen. You do need the original name of the immigrant. This is where family members can also be helpful because people often Americanized their name or anglicized their name at immigration or thereafter. Before 1820, you're looking for published lists, indexes, land records, anything that might tell you information about the immigration. Because 1820 is when passenger lists were required to be kept by US law. So, before 1820, it's luck of the draw. After 1820, less luck of a draw. Some still got lost, some still got damaged. We're looking at ports that, storms ran through. There might have been a leak in the ceiling. But there are lists and lists of immigration and passenger lists. National Archives, Philby's. Philby was a indexer who did a lot of indexing for these ship records. Family History Library in Salt Lake City, or Family Search, the internet, also Germans to America, Irish to America. There are a bunch of reference sets. Now, we don't have all of those sets in our room because a lot of our South Carolina people did not immigrate through the major immigration zones. And a lot of the settlers in Spartanburg County until the 20th century really did come early down the Great Wagon Road. So came in somewhere else and then moved into South Carolina. Always check for a second page or a back page to the document. Remember, there were roughly 100 points of entry. And border crossings from Canada to Mexico. So there are a lot of places to check. Um, People tended to stay together in a new country if they arrived with people from their old town. Sometimes you do people see people splitting off because one had a job here and one had a job there, and they just had no comprehension of how distant those two places might be. So, what do passenger lists look like? Well, this is a Lister manifest of alien passengers. Again, not little green people, but non-citizens. They would have had a separate list for the American citizens who were on this ship. Um, this is for Alma Helfrid Teresa Peterson, age 21. She was female, single, a houseworker. She can read and write Swedish, not English, Swedish. She's from Sweden. She is Scandinavian. Her last residence was Higby, Sweden. And if I'm pronouncing any of these wrong, I correct me because I don't know Swedish. Um, the name of someone back home was her mother, Ida Peterson, and Laterp, and her destination was Brooklyn, New York. On the back of the page, as I said, here's where the good stuff is. Yes, she has a ticket to her final destination. She paid for her own passage. If she, in a possession of $50 or less, if $50 or if less, how much? She had $25. No, she has not been to the US before. She is going to join her cousin Christina Janssen at 554 85th Street in Brooklyn, New York. Do you intend to return to the country of origin? No. Length of intended stay in US? Ever. So forever. Do you intend to become a US citizen? Yes. Sometimes this passenger list declaration substitutes as the filed declaration of intention. Sometimes people did file that first paper in the court also. So you may find the declaration here in the passenger list. But yes, she intends to become a U.S. citizen. Was she ever in prison? No. And then there is this whole series of questions across the middle. She answers no to all of them, but they're kind of interesting. What are they asking in 1920? I think is, no, she was 21. So 1922 when she came over. So, was she coming due to a promise of employment um, in the US, whether she's been deported within a year, her condition of health. Oh, sorry, I skipped a couple lines. That's important. So, in this, was she ever in prison? A polygamist and anarchist believes in the violent overthrow of the government, whether coming due to a promise of employment in the US, whether she's been deported within a year. All of these were no for her. She was coming to her cousins, but not with a promise of a job. And then some condition of health questions. Physical and mental health was good. Deformed or crippled. Nature, length of time, and cause. She was not. She was 5'2" at her max. And then complexion was fair. Color of hair was light. Color of eyes was blue. And no particular marks of identification. And her place of birth was Hugby, Sweden. So, always look at the back of the page. You may find. Now, if they answered yes to that anarchist question or polygamous question, that would probably get them right back on the boat right back out of Ellis Island. So now I knew she had immigrated. And when I asked my uncle, her son, he said, well, we've lost the paperwork. It may have gone to one of his half sisters. He doesn't know. So I happened to find a 1939 list of U.S. citizens, passenger list of the SS Drottningholm from uh, Gothenburg, Germany, uh, June 1st, 1939, coming into the port of New York, the 10th of June, 1939. On line two, we have Alma Brubaker. So she was a housekeeper. She went to work for Reverend Brubaker, my uncle's father, and helped care for his daughters from his first marriage. And they got married. And so she did this proves that sometime between 1922 when she arrived and 1939 when she's coming back into the country after taking my uncle to as an infant to visit her family in Sweden, she was naturalized. Well, this says if, she's married, if naturalized, what court holds the certification? It was issued at the Common Pleas Court, Paterson, New Jersey, February 18th, 1937, and the number of the certificate gives their address in the US. So, what did I do? I knew the naturalization number and location. Paterson, New Jersey is in Passaic County, New Jersey. Now we have adventures in finding it. In 2016, which is the time I initially did the research, I called them up. They said, send us an email with the information. I emailed them the information. They said, yeah, we have it. It'll be $3. Do you want a true copy with the seal on it for an additional $5? I said, sure. My aunt and uncle tried to pay me the $8 that it cost me. I said, no, you're letting me use this in my programs. I can pay $8. Now, had to send them a check, and they sent it to me by email when I received it. Now, the print is a little hard to read on this one, but it is the copy of the petition for naturalization. Has her signature. It shows two neighbors were her witnesses. Don't ask me why the Reverend wasn't, but anyway. Um, and then we get the seal of authentication. Now, this, of course, is a scan. I did give the actual sealed copy to my uncle. Um, and it verifies that her oath of allegiance, giving up her oath to the King of Sweden, and swearing her allegiance to the United States. And you get the certificate of arrival on the SS Stockholm, which is that earlier one that we saw, page 27 on that. Now, in 2021, I was able to go on the Passaic County Court records and find a better copy of a darkened copy of the print on their website for free. Woohoo! In 2026, you now have to pay again, and the fee has gone up. It's $8 per individual, or $10 for a letter of no record. So, and I'm sure the certification is more. So 2024, 2026, it's back behind a paywall. So this is your reminder that just because you find it online today means save that sucker. Do not depend that it will always be there. or always be accessible in the same way you found it. Sometimes you'll luck out with timing. So this is the bottom of the form. And it's a fillable form and you send in your stuff. You can pay online now rather than sending the check. And that's going to depend on area by area. But remember way back at the beginning when was talking about immigration with the I being the arrival and the intent to become a citizen in a new place, and the immigration with an E, meaning exiting a country with the intent to settle elsewhere. Well, when you leave a country, that passenger record is in the language of the port that you left. So, this is the Swedish passenger list for Alma for her departure from Sweden on the 26th of September 1922 on the SS Stockholm. So, just because you cannot find the arrival passenger list does not mean you can't find the departure, or vice versa. So, know that you've got options and more than one place to look. Also, just because they departed, in this case, Stockholm, or the SS Stockholm was Gutenberg, um, there may have been an intermediary port. So you may see people departing from places like Liverpool because they got a ship from wherever they were departing to Liverpool and then got on the ship in Liverpool to New York. It does not mean that they were from Liverpool or any of the other ports. So, but all of those ports did keep records. Some of them are easier to get our hands on than others, but you may find some treasures. And this does say that she was headed, born in 1901, headed to Brooklyn, New York. So that helps us narrow things down. Now, we know the address of that cousin in New York, and we could research more of the family there. So, where do you find these? Um, this was a couple years ago. I did this particular screenshot, but I just went to the card catalog at Ancestry, searched for naturalization, and at that point it was 93 record collections. It's now 103 record collections as of last week. So these are places that you can find these various types of either the actual passenger lists or the cards that would tell you arrivals or naturalization index cards, such as the one here for Elizabeth Jane's Rouse, no relation. And they have an S on Jane. She doesn't put the S on Jane in her signature. So again, know that sometimes things are a little bit loosey-goosey when it comes to spelling. Um, that really doesn't start tightening up as much until we start getting Social Security cards and driver's licenses, and then they start getting a lot tighter about using the same name in the same form. So you may find this, and the records are not online, but you can contact the court for whom these index cards are made. You may also find not individual naturalization petitions. These are for the court in Aiken, South Carolina. And you see a number of people's names there. I'm going to blow it up just a little bit because you see that the third line down is Sulmait Sheas. I I know I butchered that badly. but he's changing his name to Sol Hayes. Or Jan Johansson on line 5, who's changing his name to John Johnson. So anglicizing your name often happened at this time if there is ever an official record of the name change. Again, until we really started bearing down on um, social security cards and driver's licenses, and more popularly, a lot more people have passports now than ever in the history of our country. Um, until those things started requiring all of the things to use the same name, there may or may not have been an official name change. Some people changed their names 4 or 5 times. I've got a colleague whose immigrant ancestor, um, he's found records under 5 names. So you do the best you can to find them. So that is a helpful side effect of the naturalization. So if you need the address to write for a copy of the handout, that is here on this page, kroom@infodepot.org. You can also call the Kennedy Room at the number there. So, are there questions?
No, ma'am, but I have one.
Oh, good. Maybe
Okay.
somebody else will
And
think of one here in a minute.
well, I don't even know if there's an answer to this or not, but are
Okay.
you aware if there are any, what happens to the denied thing, or do, are there applications that were denied
Yes,
at
there
all?
were
Yeah.
applications that were denied for any number of reasons. And often um, they would reapply. Some of it was they couldn't find a legal entrance to the US because, oh, maybe they came under a brother's name, something
Oh,
like that. Um,
yeah.
sometimes they just couldn't prove the passenger list, or they couldn't prove that they had been here the 5 years, resident the 5 years they needed to be.
So do you think those applications were just trashed,
No,
or do
they're
they,
they're in the court records. Yeah,
are
they're
they
in the court
really?
records. And then a lot of the time, um, people would then reapply. So I'm trying to think which ones I've seen. I've seen one denied for lack of the 5 years proof. And I'm pretty sure that person just applied after they made the thing. Or they
Okay.
couldn't prove the certificate of intention. And so, or the declaration of intention. And so they went ahead and just declared that and then
Oh,
waited the 5 years to do the next step again. So again,
I was
some of
just,
it's timing, which
yeah, I
is
was just
a
wondering
pain.
because I was like, as I was listening, I was just like, surely somebody's been denied something. And is there any valuable information on a denied application
Well,
that
and
can
it'll
still
tell
be
you why
used?
it's denied. Yeah, it tells you why it's denied. So that can be helpful. Um,
Okay. And who would
so
have that?
yeah.
Is that who would have that? Is that the NARA or
Well,
what?
yeah, it's whoever has the application because that's here on the back of, sorry, I got to get back to the correct part of the thing. So in this section, um, at the very bottom, or at the top on this page, you see the order of the court denying petition and said, upon consideration of the petition of this is blank because this one wasn't denied, and the motion of somebody contesting it, um,
Oh,
for the United States in open court on this day of this year, it appearing that whatever the situation is, the said petition is hereby denied.
So they could still
This,
stay the 5 years and then try again.
yes,
Is that correct?
this
Okay,
is
so it's
not
not like they were sent home.
right. They are not kicked out at this point.
Okay.
Um, And you can see this is why they have the continuances. So
Yeah.
if they get denied, there's a there is an appeal hearing, that kind of thing, because they may
Okay.
just need to have additional witnesses, or they might
Right.
be denied because a witness didn't show up.
Okay.
I mean, even benign reasons why someone wouldn't um, be approved. So yeah,
Okay.
so that's again, check the back of the page.
Okay.
It has the good stuff. So,
All right, thank you. It just came to my mind. I'm like, you know what? I've never thought about that before, but I guess one could be denied, and then what do you do, you know? But
yeah,
like you said, you just wait the additional 5 years and then try again.
yeah. And
Okay.
sometimes it wouldn't have been the whole 5 years. Back here on Alma's Grandma Brubaker's, it gives all sorts of information about, where they are, that kind of thing, where she was from, etc. And as I said, the two witnesses are two neighbor ladies.
Yeah.
And not her husband. And I've always wondered, was he doing a funeral that day? Why wasn't he in court to support his wife? Um, and nobody alive knows, so we'll never
Okay.
get that answer. Um,
All right. Well, that was all the questions. No one put anything in the chat, and I don't see anyone typing anything right now. So I'm glad you were able to answer my question and spend some time on it with me.
well, and one of the things that I have found to be very interesting in when I'm looking at this is just how many people were in those automatic naturalization categories, including most, if not every single immigrant in my family, my direct family line. As I say, I have to go with Grandma Brubaker, my cousin's other grandmother, because she's the only person I know directly who came through Ellis Island. So my people came in often colonial Virginia, pretty much
Yeah.
lock,
Yeah.
stock, and barrel. I have one dude who was born in New York, but I can't figure out who his parents are, much less where they came from. So
Yeah.
it's just one of those things where I'm happy to adopt others. And again, my appreciation to Kathy, who allowed me to use her family papers as an example in this, because they're very interesting and they're very helpful to see. So,
Okay. Well,
thank you for coming, and I guess we'll see you next month for looking at our social history, and how we can use research and resources outside of some of our typical. I mean, some of them, newspapers, city directories, etc., will show up, but some of the other resources may not be ones you have taken the chance to look at. So, thank you
okay.
very much, and we can turn the recording off.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.